The Neverhood, not to be mistaken for Everhood, is a Claymation point-and-click adventure game from 1996. Published by DreamWorks Interactive and designed by Doug TenNapel, taking just one look at it, it comes as no surprise this was made by the same guy behind Earthworm Jim. Despite underselling at release, the Neverhood would go on to become a cult classic, and as a result, it's pretty hard to get a hold of. Not to mention get running nowadays on modern machines without some outside help like ScumVM. The story itself is pretty simple, with you controlling Klayman, a naive, borderline mute bloke made of clay, who's just woken up in his own personal purgatory of a world riddled with puzzles. In media res style, you're left to figure out just what the heck is going on and what you're supposed to be doing. The story is mainly derived from these 20 cassette tapes you find scattered throughout the Neverhood, and it's presented by Willie Trombone, who explains what part you have to play in everything.
Story about good. Story about bad.
The gameplay is equally simple, being bereft of any inventory or heads-up display. You solely rely on using the mouse to navigate throughout the world, whether that be through third person when presented with problems to overcome, or first person when moving between rooms. You also use the mouse to pick up and interact with objects, with Klayman helpfully storing any key items inside his chest cavity for safekeeping. Puzzle solving, however, is not as straightforward. I'm sorry to say that they range from okay to kind of bad, really. Nothing atrocious, but there are plenty of instances that will leave you stuck scratching your head on where to go or what to do next to progress. Whether it's having to jot something down that won't become necessary until 10 screens later, or pulling a specific foghorn after you've already solved the obvious puzzle in this room. Since the Neverhood is a 90s adventure game, it wants you to write down just about everything you see and generally dick around with anything and everything you can. Mind you, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but here it's mainly an exercise of frustration. A lot of times it comes down to just remembering things like this literal game of memory. Here you have to pair up every matching symbol, and if you get just one wrong, well, it's back to the start for you, Clayboy. Then it turns out the game is just baiting you anyway, since it's not even necessary to complete this puzzle. Instead, you have to remember how many of a certain symbol shows up for a completely different, unrelated puzzle elsewhere. Just why? Granted, there are a lot of clues scattered around, and it leaves you to piece them together to figure out the solution, but some of these can be easily missed if you don't think to check a room you cleared ages ago under different circumstances. Or hell, thinking to close a door in one building to extend a ladder in a completely different, unconnected building. It truly is cartoon logic, which I guess mission accomplished for the style they were going for, but damn. And sure, there are some half-decent puzzles, like arranging these blocks in the right order to turn a bridge into a stairway, or guiding a mouse through a maze to reach its cheese.
We're the rats. We pray at night, we stalk at night. We're the rats.
There's even an in-game hint room, with Willie writing down letters directed to Klayman, with both hints on what to do next, as well as less than helpful junk mail. But for every sliding puzzle, there's an equally far worse one that serves to simply stop you dead in your tracks for ages. This one is by far the worst, having you painstakingly record the symbol shown on a monitor much earlier in the game to input here in the correct sequence. It takes a long time to cycle through them, and it took me ages to figure out I was meant to swap out one specific symbol for another symbol that's shown when a certain sound plays. The only problem is that this sound keeps playing here, so it completely throws you off when you're trying to focus. It doesn't help that these monitors are also literally minutes away from each other, even if you skip the first-person movement sections by pressing the spacebar, since you still have to watch Klayman chat stride between areas when in third person. It's no wonder that the Neverhood garnered a reputation for bad puzzles, where, again, it's not the worst culprit, but it's very much reminiscent of the 90s. At least it's not like a Sierra game wherein you can dick yourself out of completing the game by doing something wrong, with the only way here to die is very clearly labeled as not being a very good idea to try. Besides, I think the sections where you drive the buggies around are the most janky part of the game by far. They're nowhere near responsive to where you're clicking, and they quickly overstay their welcome from how slow and drawn out these sections become. Thankfully, they only show up a couple of times, but that doesn't make navigating them any better with how clunky the maneuvering is. Questionable puzzles aside, it's painfully clear that a lot of love went into the Neverhood, judging by the lavish movements and details they put into every little thing, and it's especially apparent during the over-the-top cutscenes. Hell, even the idle animations are wholly unnecessary, but add a lot of character and charm, showing off just how goofy Klayman can be. It's clearly artists just having a really good time with what they're doing, and here it shows. Surely, what suffers in gameplay is offset by just how much the game excels in just about every other part of its presentation. Being genuinely interesting to explore and just look at everything this strange, colorful world has to offer. The style also plays into its slapstick humor rather well, although some jokes can be a little too reliant on its random factor or stretch a joke for far longer than it ought to. Did you know this game has Bible-sized lore? Oh god. Boy, I'm glad that's over with. Now to leave through the window. Now to leave through the... I have to go back through the hallway, don't I? It's pretty incredible they would go through the effort to bother including all this stuff, since it doesn't even directly influence anything to do with the game itself. It's just a collection of lore to fill out the wider setting, explaining where the likes of Hoborg, your dad, came from, and what's the deal with Willy Trombone and that one giant Teddy-obsessed robot. While more or less parodying the Bible, where it clearly took inspiration from, and you can again see representations of these mentioned characters later on in a room full of statues. It's little details like this that really help flesh out the world and make it feel like a lot more is going on than what is immediately apparent or you're readily made aware of unless you go digging for it yourself. Given just how simple the game's story is, it's pretty deep stuff you can go diving through that's completely optional. The Neverhood has very few characters, and they're mainly absent outside of key moments throughout the game. This, combined with a lack of music whilst exploring, can end up making the world feel really lonely and kind of creepy as a result, often leaving you with nothing more than the wind whistling past as you explore, or the thud of scummy clay after draining a ravine. This distinct lack of sound sets the ambiance to the point that it's kind of foreboding, and it honestly helps balance out the more lighthearted moments, like shrinking yourself down to traverse between levels, or feeding Willy's flytrap. Speaking of the music, I'm unsure if it can even be called that. It's unlike any other soundtrack I've ever heard before. It's as if they told Terry Scott Taylor to go absolutely ham, and that's precisely what he did. From random gibberish over a radio, to blues, to whatever the heck this is during the opening cinematic. The absolutely insane soundtrack manages to bring everything else together and make it just somehow work. Without it, a lot of sequences would just fall flat, and it works wonders at really establishing the silly, lighthearted tone they were going for, while also adding surprising weight to the very few serious moments when it really needs to. All of this came together to really cement a permanent spot in my brain. There's a lot of words I could use to describe this game: quirky, frustrating, bizarre, strange. While they all apply, they just don't do it justice. I can say with all certainty that it's definitely unique and certainly worth playing through yourself if you're a fan of adventure games, although I do advise you to be ready to open up a guide when necessary. The Neverhood is a surreal game unlike any I've ever experienced before, and even with its flaws, it's stuck out in my memory ever since I first booted it up all those years ago. It truly is a classic game of its time.